Imagine this. The year is 1312, and winter has arrived like a merciless executioner. The sun vanishes before supper, the rivers harden into glass, and the wind claws at your skin as though it wants to strip the soul right out of your bones. You are not a knight in shining armor, nor a noble wrapped in velvet. You are a peasant, a farmer, a thatcher, a baker's apprentice. Someone with cracked hands and aching joints who must somehow face months of cold without central heating, electric blankets, or even the guarantee of a solid roof. And the cruel truth is, if you get it wrong, you don't just shiver, you die. But somehow, peasants endured. Year after year, century after century. They survived winters that would send most of us modern folk screaming back indoors after 5 minutes. So, what clever tricks, what ingenious little hacks, kept them from freezing to death in those drafty huts, with the snow piling against their doors and the nights stretching endlessly on? That's the riddle we're unraveling tonight. And by the time we're done, you might look at your thermostat with a brand new kind of respect. Let's start with their homes, because that's the fortress, or more accurately, the sieve they had to rely on. Picture a medieval peasant's hut, walls made of wattle and daub, sticks interwoven with mud, straw, and maybe a smear of dung to bind it together. Hardly the thick brickwork of a modern house, but surprisingly, the mixture insulated better than you'd think. The mud filled the gaps and kept the worst drafts out. Peasants knew to patch those walls before winter, smearing on new clay and straw, creating a fresh barrier against the wind. A hut that wasn't maintained was a death sentence, so preparing your house was as essential as stockpiling food. Then there was the roof. Thatch wasn't just pretty, it was practical. Layers of straw piled thick kept out the rain and trapped warmth inside. Of course, thatch was also home to mice, rats, and the occasional bird. But in winter, even those pests had their uses. They generated body heat up there, and peasants weren't above letting nature's freeloaders lend a little warmth. Now step inside, and notice the fire. There is no fireplace like we imagine today, no chimney, no brick hearth with a mantelpiece, just a pit in the center of the room. Smoke rising straight up through a hole in the roof, or simply drifting around until it seeped out through the thatch. It sounds miserable, but that smoky haze had a side benefit. It lingered in the rafters, insulating the roof like a dirty blanket. It also preserved the wood beams and even killed insects. A smoky home was a warm home, and peasants tolerated the coughs and stinging eyes because the alternative was frostbite. But how do you make that fire last when wood is scarce? That's where cleverness came in. Peasants knew tricks to stretch every ember. Instead of burning logs, they often burned peat blocks of dried moss and soil, dug from marshes and cut into bricks. Peat smoldered slowly, providing steady heat, without the need for constant feeding. In other regions, cow dung was shaped into patties and dried in the sun, then tossed onto the fire in winter. Yes, it smelled. Yes, it was disgusting. But when the choice is between pride and survival, dignity burns as fast as dung does. Even the way they arranged their homes was strategic. Families didn't live in sprawling rooms. They kept spaces small, low-ceilinged and crowded. Why? Because human bodies are portable heaters. The more people crammed together, the warmer the room became. Privacy didn't exist for peasants in winter, but warmth did. And not just people, the animals came in too. Chickens, goats, sheep, even pigs sometimes shared the living space. Their breath and bodies added precious degrees of heat. Imagine trying to sleep while a pig snores beside you. But hey, it's warmer than sleeping alone. Sleeping itself was an art of survival. Forget soft mattresses. Beds were stuffed with straw, which trapped air and insulated the body from the icy floor. Families often slept in one big pile. Parents, children, sometimes even grandparents, all huddled together under whatever blankets they had. The phrase night clothes didn't mean silky pajamas. It meant sleeping in your day clothes, cloaks, and even boots if necessary. Some even wrapped themselves in cloaks lined with fur, or stuffed straw inside their garments for insulation. And here's a trick that might surprise you. They didn't always sleep straight through the night. In the Middle Ages, people often practiced segmented sleep. They'd go to bed soon after dark, sleep a few hours, wake in the middle of the night to tend the fire, pray, or even chat quietly, then sleep again until dawn. That midnight waking wasn't just spiritual, it was survival. If you didn't check the fire, it could die, and relighting one from scratch in the morning was misery. So someone always woke up to nurse the embers back to life. Food played its part in warming too. Winter diets weren't glamorous, no fresh fruit, no green vegetables, but they were caloried. Porridge, bread, salted meat, cheese, and ale, all packed in the kind of heavy energy needed to keep a body from freezing. Ale especially was important. Not only did it provide warmth and calories, but the brewing process killed off bacteria, making it safer than icy water that could be contaminated. And don't underestimate the psychological heat of a hot stew bubbling in the cauldron. Even if it was thin cabbage broth, the steam alone made the hut feel less hostile. But winter wasn't just about enduring indoors. Work had to continue, even when snow blanketed the fields. So peasants had tricks for dressing themselves too. Wool was king, layer upon layer of rough wool tunics, cloaks, and hoods. Wool kept heat even when damp, a miracle compared to linen, which clung and froze. And peasants knew how to recycle. Old clothes were patched endlessly, holes stuffed with scraps of fabric or even moss. Shoes were lined with straw to insulate feet. Gloves, if you didn't have them, you stuffed your sleeves with wool or straw and wrapped rags around your hands. Crude, but effective. They also knew to keep moving. Standing still in the cold was dangerous, so outdoor chores were done quickly and with constant motion. A peasant chopping wood wasn't just gathering fuel, they were also keeping their blood pumping to avoid frostbite. And while winters shortened the workday, they didn't erase it. Animals still needed feeding, repairs still needed doing, and survival demanded effort from dawn until dusk. Let's not forget the community itself. Isolation in winter was lethal, so villagers looked after one another. Families shared fires, huddled in the warmest huts, pooled food, and passed along news. The church played a role too. Holy days in winter weren't just about religion, they were about gathering, sharing warmth, singing, and drinking. Joy was a weapon against despair, and laughter could be as warming as any cloak. But survival wasn't always just about practical tricks. It was about mental toughness. The peasants understood winter as part of life's cycle. Cold wasn't an enemy to be defeated, but a season to be endured with patience, cleverness, and faith. They had stories, superstitions, charms to ward off the frost, and rituals that gave meaning to the suffering. Hope itself was a survival strategy, and hope was stoked like the fire in the hearth. Now imagine the darkest night of January. Snow presses against the hut walls. The wind moans through the cracks. Inside, the smoke stings your eyes. The straw mattress pokes your skin. A pig's body heat radiates beside you, and your stomach is still half empty. And yet, somehow, you're alive. You will wake in the morning. You will chop more wood, feed the fire with dung, share a hunk of bread with your children, and push through another day. It isn't luxury, it's raw, ingenious survival. And that's the answer to our question. What clever tricks saved medieval peasants from freezing? It wasn't just one thing. It was 1,000 small, gritty strategies. The smoke in the rafters, the straw in the bed, the dung on the fire, the pig at your feet, the neighbor who shared a cloak, the family who piled together like coals in the dark. Survival in the Middle Ages wasn't about comfort. It was about stubbornness, about finding warmth wherever it could be stolen, even if it meant sleeping in smoke and mud with animals snoring at your side. So the next time you grumble about your heating bill, remember the peasants who kept death at bay with dung fires and straw shoes. They were clever, tough, and endlessly resourceful, and against all odds they didn't just survive winter. They endured, century after century, until here we are, telling their story while sitting in rooms so warm they would have seemed like paradise.